For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Alchemy of Pain podcast. I interview people who have been through or going through or deal with painful stuff in their lives, and they made it through. They grew resilience. They changed. They learned. And their stories can help you in your own journey. You might not have what my guests have to deal with, but you deal with something. In fact, we all deal with limitations in some form or another. And my guest today has coined the phrase limitations into leverage. So with that, I'm going to introduce my new friend, Kris Hammons. Kris, it's great to have you here today.
It's great to be here, Brenda. Thank you so much for having me on.
So limitations into leverage. Tell us the origin story of that phrase.
That one really came a couple years ago when I began writing more regularly, and we'll get to kind of how I got to that. But what I started to think through, it was reflecting on things that happened to me with having a physical limitation in dwarfism and having a lot of surgeries. Um, One thing, and going on to even having children who had some of the same things, one of the things that I've had come up time and time again was that people would say, well, I could never do what you do. I could, you must just have so much, vigor or grit or faith or the stuff, you name it. They just say, you must just have that. I don't have that. I could never do that. And what I've realized over the course of my life and more recently is that if you're willing to face those hard times, you can discover what is it that you offer to the world that maybe someone else doesn't, or what is that thing that you can do. And so for me, that's sharing my story, and I like growing as a speaker and a writer and using my experiences to help inspire other people. So by that, I'm taking something that someone else might see as a limit and turning that into a point of leverage.
So people who don't know you and to look at the screen right now would say, wait, did he say dwarfism?
Yes.
Explain to us the definition,
Yeah.
what that means in real life to you, and can we talk a little bit about your journey? I mean, it's not like this is something that you had any choice in the matter. This is what you were handed at birth. So let's talk about this a little bit. First of all, what is dwarfism?
Yeah, so dwarfism is two parts. Obviously, the more easy one to see, although you can't see it now on the camera, is short stature. And then the other component is what they call bone dysplasia, which basically just means that your bone endings don't grow correctly. Is and for most cases, that's what causes the short stature. The bones don't grow as long or maybe as strong as they need to. Um, and just kind of an aside, there's over 400 different types of dwarfism. Um, a good example, kind of two different extremes, that you might have someone like myself who's has a more rare type, not as well known. We've learned a lot about it since I've been born, but it's lesser known. And for me, the way that plays out is I have longer arms and legs, but it's my back that has taken most of the toll. Yes, my bone endings haven't grown right, and that's why I'm having hip replacement surgeries now. But mostly it has affected my back. My wife, on the other hand, has a different type of dwarfism, And what that means for her is that it's the exact opposite. Her torso is more average size, and her arms and legs, what you typically would see in Hollywood or TV. Um, it's a kind of that form of dwarfism that's the most common type called achondroplasia. And that that would jump out to you right away if you saw her sitting next to me because she would sit a whole head taller than me. Yet when we stand up, I'm a head taller than her. So yes, all different, and that, like I said, 400 different types.
Wow, thank you for educating us about this. And, you know, we all, I'll speak for myself. I was 100 pounds in kindergarten, which was so challenging, especially
Mm,
back during a time when nobody was overweight, especially children, and nobody would play with me, and I would be bullied because I looked different. I can only imagine the personal pain you dealt with having different packaging.
I'd certainly had my moments of being bullied. Certainly, in different phases of life, it took different shapes. Um, for me, it manifested more as kind of as I got older. Yes, I was bullied as a young kid. I don't. There's nothing, no one moment that really sticks out to me. But as I got older, one of the things that you don't really think about with dwarfism is fine motor skills. And so, in the day of before computers and tablets in the classroom, we were still handwriting a lot of, whether that was handwriting itself, writing papers, doing math problems, all of that was by hand. And so by the time I hit fifth or sixth grade, they being the school, started to recognize, hey, because of his fine motor skills issues, it's not that he can't do it, but it takes him longer to do it. So then that spun off into, well, let's give him half the workload because it takes him twice as long to do. And while, I wouldn't say that had a detriment to me educationally, it created a scenario where that was not immediately clear to my peers. So I certainly had some kids who struggled in school, maybe, that then looked at me and seeing getting a half course load, and cognitively I seemed fine, right? And so I was bullied probably the most in fifth and sixth grade, but it was all around, well, why do you get off? What makes you so special? Like that. That was the mentality, and that was kind of the origins of bullying. Later, it played out in different ways. I had good friends, good community, but when you're 16 and you're able to drive, or should be able to drive, but you're not because of low vision issues, that creates a scenario where your 16, 17-year-old buddies don't necessarily want to go out of their way to pick up the kid that can't drive. So it played out in different ways for sure. There was some bullying and some moments in my life of isolation.
Thank you. And that was so well put. And I could picture those scenarios. So often we judge by what we see, and yet we don't
Hmm.
really have the understanding behind it. And curiosity is a far better way to approach the things we don't understand in life, and with a little bit of empathy as well. Tell me about your family dynamic. Were you surrounded by others with your condition, or were you an anomaly in your family structure?
So it's interesting. Both me and my wife are anomalies in our families. We both are children of average sized parents. No history that we know of, although dwarfism can be very genetic. For us, it was spontaneous. The math on that is usually about one in every 10 to 15,000 births, at least the last number I saw. Um, and so for us, we had average sized parents and siblings.
And so there's that as well. In your own family unit, you're like,
Right,
I'm different from everybody else. So this had to also have a learning curve for your parents as well.
right, right. And each set of parents dealt with it differently, but they had to figure it out. Neither, there's some strong communities of, well, one strong community called the Little People of America, that is a worldwide community actually, of people with short stature, dwarfism. And uh, because of the unknown, my my parents know, or really her parents, I don't think really engaged with those communities. Maybe gave them a chance, but didn't really deeply integrate us. I think the balance they were trying to strike is, yes, there's this great vibrant community, but that's not the representation of the world. These kids are going to grow up in an average, a world bigger than them. We probably should keep them around people who are like in that world, because you can definitely get on the other side of the spectrum, where that's all you know. So
You bring up a great point, which is sometimes we want to stay in a comfort zone, which is a silo that separates
yes,
us from everybody else. So, how did you learn how to navigate integrating into a world that was bigger than you? Mentally,
ooh,
spiritually, emotionally.
right,
You had to, and I'm sure you learned by trial and error. I mean, you're wearing a cap that says grit. So, how did you develop the tools? Because I'm sure that most of our audience doesn't personally deal with dwarfism,
right,
but they deal with their own insecurities and packaging and whatever, mentally, physically, emotionally, that makes them and myself want to just stay where I feel safe.
right.
But you've accomplished, and we're going to get into all the things that
Yeah,
you've accomplished, which the doctors didn't even expect you to live, did they?
no, they didn't. They had no clue what they were doing with when I was born. So when I was born, this is 1983. So I'm aging myself here. Um, in a day where that was less common, we didn't have the technology we have today, so they didn't know what to do with it. And then it was so much of an anomaly to them. It's a lot of it was paralysis by analysis, and so they were I had some things that were known about, like I had a cleft palate, didn't have a roof in my mouth. So for the first 6 months, I'm on literally on my belly for the first 6 months of my life. It's like, don't put him back on his back. He could choke on his, because when you don't have a roof in your mouth, there's no tongue control. So they were worried about that shutting off the airway. And so just little stuff like that. And they knew, okay, we think based on what we do know, he probably has some vision problems. He probably has hearing loss, but we don't know what the extent of it is. And there were so many acute things to deal with at the time. I was seemingly going into random cardiac arrests. They never really could get that under wraps. I went home with nursing, 24-hour nursing, um, for a period of time, about 2 years, I believe. Had a couple of incidences before the age of two where it didn't look good. Um, and so yeah, they just didn't know what to do with it. When I was about a year old, doctors referred me up to a prestigious medical center. Said, why don't you go up there and so, they told my parents, let's go take him up there for a few days to run a battery of tests. And this, if I name the hospital, you would know, just right off of one of the premier medical institutions. And they did 2 days of testing on me. And at the end of it, their recommendation was, hey, to my mom, was you need to go ahead and put him in an institution now. That's his, he will not ever speak. He will never walk, talk. And so he's never going to do those things. So the quicker you institutionalize him, the better for his stake and yours.
I can't even imagine how your mother felt hearing that. And
Right.
yet something inside of her said, nope.
Hmm. Yeah, and it was it was a whole lot of grit to just look at a bunch of, people way smarter than you and say, well, no, that's not what we're going to do now. And it was some logic. She was able to see the cognitive test that they were basing this on was the last thing that they did with me over a 2 day span. So she could see, well, wait, you dilated his eyes, made his pupils really big where he couldn't see, and then you asked him to reach and grab things, which he couldn't do. So it ended up being, some fault testing there. So, she saw that too. But yes, for sure. She, a mixture of that logic and just like pure heart of like, no, this isn't how it's going to be. There's got to be another way.
And so instead of being institutionalized, she brought you home. You were told you would likely not speak. Now you're a motivational speaker.
Yeah, I
Okay.
am.
So let's go back to the original question, which is
Yeah,
how did you navigate all of this? I mean, there was no roadmap, there was no
right.
handbook to say, this is how you get along in a world where you are always going to look different from everyone else.
I would say for me, it started with a lot of what I would say blind muscle, meaning we are going to charge forward no matter what. What no whoever stands in our way. I grew up very competitive. Um, Whoever stands in my way, I'm going to go figure it out by any means necessary. Um, but at the same time, I will also tell you that in my adolescence, all the way through young adulthood, I mean, even up till the last few years, yes, I was blindly pushing through, and I don't think I really sat and processed. So figuring out how to navigate for me just looked like, hey, I am going to just keep whatever struggles I have to myself. I'm just going to figure this out. Nobody's going to stop me. It was a mental thing, right? And it wasn't until we'll get into this later if you'd like, but it wasn't until my wife and I had our third son, who spent 10 years or 10 months in the NICU. And we had a moment where things were really rough. He had a lot of breathing complications, also from dwarfism. And we had this season, the whole season was uncertainty, but we had a lot of things would look great 1 hour and would look like, you know, things were going south in a hurry the next hour. I remember one particular day being in a waiting room with some family, and they'd asked us to leave the room, said, hey, you need to step out. We're gonna clean some of his equipment. And then some time passed, about an hour. They came back and said, hey, it's time to go back in. And I got up to go back to the room, and I realized my wife, Brienne, was not with me. And I turned around and looked at her, and her eyes just were welled up. And I said, it's time to go back to his room. Like, let's go back and see how he is. And she looked at me with tears running down her cheek, and she said, I don't know whether to have hope or we need to let him go. And for no other explanation other than that I got than really divine intervention, I put my hand over her shoulders and I said, listen, this kid's gonna leave this hospital. It's the only thing I know. This kid's gonna leave this hospital. Maybe not the way we want him to, but he's gonna leave this hospital. Our job's to be there. And that was a powerful moment for us. Like that changed the way we saw his journey. And no longer was it about, are we gonna get this outcome or not? Although we wanted that, it became, well, we need to be there for him no matter how this goes. It would be easy to just isolate, go with unhealthy coping mechanisms, or just shut down. That moment, while it wasn't instantaneous, it started a journey for me personally of like, we got him out of the NICU. He ended up coming home. He's fine now. It that became I bring up that story and going all that to say that started a journey for me to realize that I had never really faced those limitations. I'd never faced the implications of what it meant having short stature. It was easier for me to just pretend I was like everybody else and just charge forward. And what I was doing is I was leaving my heart behind through the whole process. Never really opened up, never really invited people in. And, a few years later, I had a transformational moment, a weekend, a retreat where I did just that. And it changed my life and changed the way it turned me in from I realized instead of facing my journey, I was really telling myself, hey, you're just defective. You need to charge through. And what I had to come to is realize, no, because of all these things, you're actually really inspiring. You have a story to tell. So if I'm being really honest with you, I didn't really start facing it and navigating that until that point.
Thank you for sharing that part of your journey, because I think for a lot of people, and I know in my own life, it's sort of like I was in a fog for quite some time,
Hmm.
bustling through, and we wear our resilience as a badge of honor. I've
Right,
got this. Nothing's going to get me down. And yet, in muscling it through, we don't realize how much strain we are living under.
right,
And almost your wife's words, should we let go? There is some beauty in letting go as well.
right.
Not letting go of hope, but the pressure to muscle through. It seems, and I know that you are a person of faith. So is that really where a transaction took place, where it was like, okay, I've been
Yep,
doing this myself for a long time. Now I'm going to rely on something bigger than me, and not,
exactly.
and no pun intended.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think you make a great point there. Nobody's really responded with that. Like, I like that take because in reality, we both let go at that point, and it changed the course of that journey. Not so much his journey, but the way we lived that out.
Was there a stress point in your marriage determining whether or not to have children?
I think both of us were headstrong. Both of us had that blind muscles. So we came into our marriages like, no, we're gonna do this. Like, and we knew the risk and the numbers. It was 50% chance that we would have a child with any type of disorder, like one of our types. Like I mentioned, it is genetics. We knew there was a 50% chance. We have child number one. He was actually average size. He's 12 years old now, and growing very healthily, I might add. And then we had our second, who her name's Jubilee, and she has dwarfism. She has my type, and so we were able to take what we learned from me, and thankfully for her and us, we didn't have to go through some of the things my mom went through because we knew what to expect. Our third child, again, we knew the risks. We kept going. We're like, okay, well, we've had one of each. Our third, he was unique in that it's 50% you have an average size child. Then the other 25% break down this way. 25% that will be, sorry, 50% that will be have a form of dwarfism, one our type, my type or her type. The other 25% that are broken out into the other 50 are either they will be average size or first son, or um unfortunately, there's a case where they can actually get both dwarfism genes at once. It's what they call double dominant. And in most cases, in fact, all cases up to our son, at least cases we could track down, uh, children were born with the combination that he had don't make it as like the, the the medical journals I had tracked down while he was in the hospital were the longest living child was 15 months old. And so and most of them didn't make it home. So it it came with risk. Obviously, 25% feels high, but we were, like you mentioned, we're people of faith, and so we were going to go forward with that faith in mind and our hearts.
And you knew the value of your own life.
Right.
Being of short stature and having dwarfism did not diminish your value as a
Right.
human being and your ability to contribute in this life, nor your wife's. So I'm having an aha moment because, there would be some that would say, well, why would you risk that? And
Yeah.
except for the fact that here you are, you defied all the odds. You know it can be done. You were told you would never have a normal life. And I love how you put in your LinkedIn bio, and no, you haven't, because you've defied all that was
Right.
projected for your life. Tell us a few of the things that you've done. Just rattle them off. There's a great list of things you've accomplished that nobody said would happen.
Yeah, I mean, not only do I go on the walk and talk, I built up a career in tech. Was a software engineer for years, still working tech. Went on to get a really good job for Dave Ramsey. Not sure if you've ever heard of him. But so that's been really cool. Outside of that, I've been able to do a couple of speaking engagements. Let's see, my most recent was late last year, so I get to speak to nonprofits. Um, I, in the last few years, have been pretty active on LinkedIn. I wrote every day for a year from April of 22 through April of 23, just to build that writing habit. And I'm working on a book. Um, and yeah, and we're in Nashville. We love it here. And my wife and I couldn't be happier for the life that we built. She homeschools, as if we don't have enough to do. And so, yeah, so we're very blessed, very happy to not just make it, but to be in a place where we feel like we're thriving. And that's really what we want to inspire others, because going back to those comments that people made of, well, I could never do that. Well, yeah, you could. You had something. I don't know what it is. You didn't know what mine was. You just happen to notice what mine is, right? Mine's just outside. Everybody got something in here or back there that they haven't faced. And that's really the heart of grit and the heart of growing grit. It's not muscling through. That's part of it. Sure. You need to have the strength and the mind, but you can't leave your heart behind. And what does that look like? That is believing that you have a voice and using it. When you do that, you'll start finding your people. And when you do those two things, you'll really start to lean in and believe that you have a purpose in this world, whether you come from a faith background or not.
I was about to ask you, if someone were to hire you to give a keynote speech, what would it be about? And I think you just told me.
You did? Yes, I did.
That's awesome. How can people connect with you if they want you to inspire at their next conference or do any kind of an inspirational meeting or speaking engagement? How do
Yeah.
people find you?
So you can check me out on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active on all the socials, although you can find me anywhere. Um, at my name, Kris Hammons. And that's Chris with a K. And you also can find me at chrishammons.com, where you can actually email me directly and say, hey, I want to book you. So
That's awesome. Any final words for our audience? Someone perhaps that's feeling really in a dark place because they look at themselves and they don't think that they measure up. And
mhm.
they're sort of talking themselves out of living fully. What would you say to the person watching or listening?
You have a voice. And if you don't use it, you will simply sleepwalk. And you can sleepwalk through your challenges just like you sleepwalk through your life. And I'll close that with saying, you can't overcome anything you're not willing to face.
That's powerful. Thank you for facing and thriving and leveraging your limitations, which seem to end up being your superpower. I want to thank you for your time, Kris Hammons. I encourage people to go and visit your website. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this edition of The Alchemy of Pain. If you have been losing that battle in your mind, choose the light. Choose the light that
Yes.
will inspire you to keep pressing in that chrysalis so that you can emerge and spread your wings to fly. Have a great day, everyone.